Thank you for being here today. I'm Greg Hertz, Speaker of the House. One of my primary goals coming in as Speaker this session was to develop a process for planning and funding infrastructure above and beyond what we already do. And I want to thank all the legislators who worked hard from both sides of the aisle on this issue in a working group. Today I have Representative Eric Moore here. He's going to talk about the infrastructure bill, House Bill 553.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today on the floor, we are very excited to bring House Bill 553, which we have called the IDEA Act. And that acronym stands for the Infrastructure Development and Economic Accountability Act. Those of you who have been around know that for the past several sessions, we've struggled to find a reasonable mixture of cash and bonds to fund infrastructure projects outside the TSEP and outside the cold board funds that we normally do. And we think this bill is a bold new step forward in how we do our day-to-day business in the legislature with regard to this issue. Infrastructure development, of course, is what we're after here, but economic accountability means that we're going to be economically accountable to our taxpayers, that we don't overly burden them with unreasonable and unresponsible levels of general obligation debt. But it also means that we're accountable to those generations yet to come, so we don't leave them with crumbling infrastructure that it will be on their backs to fix. The bill does basically four things. It sets debt limits on general obligation bonds in terms of several different ratios, a debt to asset ratio and a cash flow ratio. It takes into account unfunded pension liability that doesn't amortize over 30 years. It sets as a policy of practice that we dedicate a certain amount of cash to maintenance and repair to our state buildings. That's a pretty simple axiom. You have to fix and maintain what you have before you can build anything new. We feel that's pretty common sense. It creates a working rainy day fund, which will use bonds in times when cash is tight and revenues are down. In times where we're more flush, we will use more cash and we will pay down debt. That's what working Montanans do in their daily budgets, and that's how we want state government to act. And finally, it will require that the executive presents to every legislative session a 6-year infrastructure plan, which could be a mix of state buildings, local water and sewer, or impacts from energy development. And then that will be the discretion of the legislature to allocate as they see fit. As the Speaker said, this is truly how government should work. This was a bipartisan, bicameral group of legislators from both houses of the legislature that spent a lot of time around a conference table, around a whiteboard, figuring out how to make this work. This is how government ought to work. Washington ought to take a lesson. With that, I will introduce Minority Leader Schreiner.
Thank you, Representative Moore. Today's an exciting day for the people of Montana. Today, I think we showed that as leadership of this body, we're able to come together and get good work accomplished. We as Democrats are also excited. We came into this session saying that we need to get infrastructure accomplished. We need to have a plan moving forward. As the Speaker said, I'm glad that he and I both agree on that. We see this as step one of a process to make sure that we're taking care of the people of Montana, getting people to work, putting shovels in the ground, and doing good work. I want to compliment all the legislators on both sides of the aisle and both houses who got together, as the good representative said, around a table with a whiteboard, drawing out what this needs to look like moving forward. And hopefully we set this is the first step in setting Montana up for prosperous development into the future. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yes. What's this mean for the House Bill 14, the bonding bill? We're going to see a new bonding bill. How are these related, and what's going to happen with that?
This bill is not a bonding bill in and of itself. This bill is a structure, a framework of how we will do these projects going forward. So it does not contain any specific projects in it. Matter of fact, it's a general bill. So that's why we're hearing it today, because it's got to make transmittal. There will be a traditional bonding bill coming forward after transmittal. It will have some of House Bill 14's aspects in it, and then some other things that we'll put in ourselves.
Do you have a sense of how much bonding is going to be included in that bill?
It's going to be less than House Bill 14. Those details are still being worked out. It'll at a starting place, it'll be somewhere between 50 and 100. Obviously, then it's got lots of steps to go through before it reaches the finish line.
Do you anticipate some of the higher, more interest projects we're seeing in Romney, all of those in the historical society, you see those included in the bond bill that come out? You see them broken out, and you see the historical society broken out as just two separate bills?
I think the Historical Society will start out as a separate bill, and I think a mixture of state buildings and local infrastructure. It'll be a package in the bonding bill that we put forward.
You said this is a bipartisan effort. Did the governor's office have input?
The governor's office did have input. We had representatives from the Office of Budget and Planning sat in on several of our work sessions. They gave constructive input and we took it into account.
For local communities and counties, how are they going to get on the list for any of these projects? Do they have to go through their rep or through the governor's office, or how do you foresee some of these other projects throughout the state?
The Department of Architecture and Engineering will have a say in prioritizing these projects, much as they do with TCEP currently, but it will be proposed by the executive in a 6-year plan. And I think that's another big change that this bill is looking forward. We've just, in prior years, this bill is all about consistency. It's about doing a little something every 2 years, not doing $100 or $200 million in bonding 1 year and then not doing anything for the next decade. So I think by having a structured plan going through time, it will sort of save the everybody want to get on the last lifeboat off the Titanic attitude that we've seen the last several sessions, because we can say, no, your project's not in for this, but it's tentatively scheduled for 2021 or 2023 or 2025. Try to get more. That's the whole basis of what we're trying to accomplish here, is to get an organized plan and a disciplined approach as we move through time, not so hit or miss as we've done in the past.
Do you think that debt limits in the bill are the right place to set those debt limits?
You know, I think that's open to conversation moving forward, but I think it's really important that we, one, get this across the way. We know that the infrastructure conversation, as everybody in this room is dedicated to getting something accomplished, we know there's going to be more negotiation, more conversation. I will say, specific to Representative Moore's bill, a lot of thought and time and effort was put into this with those folks around the table, with input from the second floor. So at this point, we know things can change moving forward, but we are going to support the bill as it stands as of right now.
Any further questions? Well, again, I'd just like to thank Representative Moore for carrying this bill and the group of bipartisan legislators who worked on this bill in both chambers, and we'll be moving forward with this today. We will be having another press conference here shortly to dealing with another good bipartisan bill that we have worked on in regard to the sexual abuse cases across the state of Montana.